Okay, so here's our example of allocating out the support center costs in a Habitat for Humanity scenario. This may not be entirely accurate for most Habitat for Humanities, but it gives us some numbers to work with. So we're going to allocate these two support centers, the development and grants and the general administration. We've got their direct costs right here, and we're going to allocate them down to these three mission centers so that we can identify what the full cost of those mission centers. So I'm just going to color these support centers so we can recognize where they're at. This is not necessary, just to help us recognize and keep track of where our mission centers are. Our mission centers are down here, and our support centers are up here in shading. So this is a direct allocation method, or direct method of allocation, and we are going to we're going to send all of the $350,000 of direct costs in the general admin directly down to the three mission centers without sending any of those costs first over to development, or the development costs over to general admin. We're going to use, we only have 2 bits of information here. We have the FTE number, and, well, I guess we have 3, because we have direct costs, we have FTEs, and we have donations. Let's decide to use here, so this is the raw numbers, this is the numbers we're selecting. So we're going to use the FTE for general admin, which is a reasonable number, but you can see that it would be different if we use direct cost. And so we're just going to bring those numbers in here. The FTEs numbers for general admin, or sorry, the FTE for construction, the FTE for the restore, and the FTE for revitalization. But we want to sum this, because we're just wanting the share of FTEs amongst these mission centers. We don't want the share of FTEs including the 2 support centers, because that activity in there is not related to the allocation down to the mission centers from a direct allocation perspective. And then so also we'll then bring in the relevant donation activity, and so that gives us the donations, proportion of donations that happen for construction, restore, and revitalization. Now clearly there's a huge amount of donation that happens to general admin. We're in the direct allocation method, so we're not sending any of the development costs over to general admins. It all goes straight down. So we're ignoring that in this allocation approach. So now that we have these numbers, those are the relevant numbers for the allocation basis or allocable activity, then we are just going to bring in the proportions. So I'll divide the 4 by the total, I'll lock that in on the row, and then I'll make this percentage. I'll fill that down, and just to double check that this is bringing in 100% of the, in this case it's FTEs, 100% of the FTE amongst the mission centers is collected here. And so then I should be able to drag all of this over, and then this is bringing in the percentages of the development the donation activity. So we're using the proportion of FTEs amongst the mission centers to allocate down the $350,000 in general admin to the mission centers, and we'll use the proportions of donations to allocate down the $120,000 of development down to the mission centers. So we start here by, this is the process I like to use that keeps things fairly clear in my mind, at least, that the process is going correctly. So I'm going to bring over this negative $350,000. I'm going to remove $350,000 from general admin, and I'm going to allocate it down to these 3 mission centers. And so I'll just take that, or I could take this number, I'll lock that in because that's the one I'm going to use every time in this column, and I'll multiply the 350,000 by the 23.53%. That's the percent of general admin activity that's allocated to the construction cost center, or in other words, construction cost center has 23.54% of the FTEs amongst the mission centers, and so therefore they get 23.53% of this $350,000. And then, so I'll just allocate that out. So now we have 350,000 multiplied by the 58%, and 350,000 multiplied by the 17.65%. And if I sum that, it'll get to 0, because remember, it was sort of the money's all been gone, and so we don't have any extra money. We just removed it from one cost center and sent it over to the others. So then we just do the same thing over here. And we'll take this 120,000. See if you can do this before I do it. I'm not going to narrate it so much in this one. It's the same sort of process. So let's see if I did that. Yep. Surprisingly similar to construction, isn't it? And then we will sums to 0, just like we expected. So the sum total, if we add across these rows, it's going to give us the subtotal. But let's do it this way. Let's change the title. I'm going to change the title here to the indirect, and we'll call this the full cost. And so we're going to ignore these first two because they've all been allocated out, and we'll sum these two columns. We can see that the indirect costs that have been allocated down to construction are 164,000. To the restore, it's this 240,000, and to the revitalization, it is the 65,000. And then the full cost, we got to be careful here that we don't just sum across the whole thing. Full cost will be the direct cost plus the indirect. Now, if we've done this correctly and we sum this full cost, it will give us the exact same direct costs of the whole organization. Here is the sum of all the indirect costs, which is the same as the sum of the two support centers. So those are just a couple things we can do to double check that we've done this correctly. All right.